So I thought the last thing I would ever see is the snowflakes falling on the torpedo that was going to sink my ship. That's a true story. This guy named Bill Carter wrote that. It was a line that I helped him write for his autobiography about World War II. It's this incredible story. It would make a great TED Talk about drama and courage and survival and the heartbreak of losing your friends and about how much it takes to overcome Nazi Germany in the middle of the Arctic. And it's a story I could never possibly live up to, so it's not one I'm going to tell, because you don't want to start off with that level of expectations. I'm going to start instead with a couple of talks. One, hyperlocal. I grew up in an incredible town. There were 20 different languages spoken at home in my town. And my friend Kenny Armwood was convinced in this incredible town that we had a racist high school principal. And Kenny would say, "Oh my God, Brian, the principal was there as Jamal Harris got an award to be our next valedictorian, and she said to him, 'Wow, with those SATs, you'll get into a great black college.'" And Kenny sat there as that principal made fun of the hard work of his own single mom. And Kenny said, "Brian, this is not right. This is not right anywhere. This is particularly terrible in our town. But who's going to listen to me? I'm just a student." And I said, "You know, Kenny, if you were on the school board, everybody would have to listen to you, because you'd actually vote on her contract." And he said, "Huh, you're right. Somebody's got to run for school board. Why not me?" And within a few months of graduating, Kenny Armwood was the youngest black elected official in the country and fulfilled every high school student's dream of firing his high school principal. And he said, age is no obstacle to social change. And that'd be a good TED Talk too, right? But maybe you're more global. Maybe you came to listen to a talk about how you could have a global impact. Maybe you're like my friend Sydney Kamen. When Sydney was 15, she got a grant. Who knows to get grants at 15? Sydney did. She got a grant to go to Thailand, where she learned firsthand that over 2.5 million children a year die from diarrhea and respiratory ailments. And she learned at 15 that if you have access to hygiene and greater cleanliness, you can reduce that rate by up to 50%. And instead of just being broken by those facts, like I would have been at 15, Sydney thought, what can I do so that others are protected? So that others are protected. SOAP, that's a great acronym. What if I, Sydney Kamen, could convince a bunch of luxury hotels and lots of people with plenty to give those shards of soap and send them locally so that they could be turned into bars of soap so these kids could wash their hands and not lose their lives. And at 16, Sydney went to Uganda, and at 17, she went to Haiti, and at 18, she went to India. And she's now a student at Dartmouth, and she delivers tens of thousands of bars of soap a year back to those communities. Because Sydney knew that age is not an obstacle to creating global change. And she knew that somebody had to step up and help those kids. Why not her? And so maybe that's a TED Talk we'd want to hear at length too. Or maybe you came because you need advice on your own career. Well, Teddy Schleifer is from here in Delaware. And when he was 16 years old, he applied for a job in the governor's office. And Teddy said, he actually worked for me, he said, "Brian, I heard that when you were 16, you lied about your age to get a job as a reporter and got a chance to write for a newspaper because you thought, hey, I'm as good a writer at 16 as some of these 40-year-olds. Well, you know what, Brian? I think I'm probably as good as some of these 40-year-olds. Instead of just doing normal intern duty, could you give me a chance to write the first draft of a speech for the governor? Could you give me the chance to do the first draft of a press release?" And I said, "Teddy, hell yes." And by the end of the summer, Teddy was my go-to person for first drafts on things that needed to sing, on things that needed to have some inspiration behind them. He was my absolute go-to person because he thought at 16 to try and apply. And by the time he was a freshman in college, he spent his next summer writing for the Secretary of Education for the United States of America, Arne Duncan. And he went on to work hands-on in the middle of a presidential campaign the year after that and become a reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer and become a reporter for the New York Times. And at 22 or 23, he moved to Texas to write for the Houston Chronicle, where he got to know this guy named Ted Cruz, who was running for president. And Ted Cruz started to take off. And the guy that was the single best person, regardless of his age, at covering Ted Cruz was Teddy Schleifer, now called Theodore, correctly. And CNN said, we need somebody to cover Ted Cruz. We know he's only 23, but if Teddy knows more than everybody else, why don't we make Teddy a producer for CNN? And when you watch CNN now, tomorrow night especially, you'll see 24-year-old Teddy Schleifer as their reporter for Money and Politics. Because Teddy knew that somebody was going to be in that spot. Somebody was going to file that report. Why not him? That age is no obstacle to getting ahead. And the only problem with that as a TED Talk is that people are sick of politics. So I won't talk about that. Let's talk about sports. People love sports. I helped build a sports network called Whistle Sports. We have 260 million fans and followers in the last 2 years. And the first thing I do when I wake up is I check social media to see what some of our creators are doing. And at 5 a.m., it is amazing, none of our creators, but it is amazing how many digital celebrities are just rolling into bed at 5 a.m. They have been living the life that so many people wish. And so it's like, it's 5 a.m. and I'm finally going to sleep. Yeah! And that's not a Whistle Sports creator. Whistle Sports creators like Indy Cowie are like, it's 5 a.m. Here's my coffee. Here's my sketchbook. I'm about to go spend 3 hours in the gym. See, Indy dreamed of being a pro soccer player. She wanted to play for the World Cup. She wanted to play for the national team. And she was focused entirely on that. But when she was a teenager, she also realized that when she wasn't there playing with team games, with just her ball and just her sneakers and just herself, she could get really, really good at juggling and really, really good at what's called freestyle. And Indy realized that just by spending hours a day with her shoes, her ball, and herself, she could do incredible things. And by the time she was a teenager, she was playing halftime shows in stadiums full of people. And by the time Indy got to college, and that moment happens that terrifies every college athlete, she had a career-ending injury that meant she'd never make the national team. She realized that just gave her more time for her ball, her shoes, and herself. And now, even though she's, I think, 22, she has millions of followers across social media. When Nike gives out sponsorships to people like LeBron James and Neymar, they also sponsor Indy Cowie. When Disney decides they're going to launch a movie, they call Indy Cowie and have her do videos. And when we did an event with Michelle Obama and her F&V Live campaign to try and inspire a couple thousand kids in Virginia, Michelle Obama called Jessica Alba, Gabrielle Union, Jordan Sparks, and Indy and Sky Cowie to really motivate people. Because what Indy proved as a teenager is that age is no obstacle to reaching millions. That'd be a good TED Talk, too, if we expand it a little bit. The problem, though, is that TED Talks are supposed to have some kind of connection to the person giving them. So, my own story. A few months before Kenny got on the school board, I was the student rep to that same school board. And I was blessed as a child with neither athletic ability nor popularity, which is a tremendous benefit because I had so much free time that others spent doing things like getting to go to parties or having soccer practice. And so I would do things like before our school board meetings, go through our school's affirmative action policy. Because like you could tell I didn't go to many parties. I own it. And I'm looking through it, and I noticed that the affirmative action policy in Piscataway, New Jersey in 1993-94 did not prevent the school from firing people for being gay. And so I raised my hand in a meeting, and I said, you know, I just noticed this policy. It says that we could fire, and I mentioned the name of one of our gay teachers. And I'm sure it's just an oversight, so I'd like to motion to change the policy to outlaw discrimination based on sexual orientation. Easy enough? No, not easy enough. Oh my God. Literally. I mean, just, you know, the amount of people that came out of the woodwork to say terrible things about me for wanting to do that. They adjourned the meeting, and the next month they had this meeting, and so the meeting comes, and I'm sitting there up on stage with all of these folks who are 40 like I am now, and they're having a debate, and I'm watching the crowd full of supporters, some people very mad at me. And in the back of the room was my Vietnam volunteering, Republican voting, Cub Scout leading, motorcycle riding, massive badass conservative father. And I wondered, what is Dad thinking at this moment? And what Dad was thinking was, Brian doesn't even know I'm gay, and he's willing to do this for me. And maybe it's okay to be more true to myself. See, I didn't know that I was standing up to help my father. I just knew at 16 years old that somebody had to change this policy. And so I asked, why not me? And you go across all of these TED Talks that somebody will make into great TED Talks about how Kenny said, somebody has to fire that principal, why not me? And Sydney said, somebody has to save those lives, why not me? And Teddy said, somebody's going to write those speeches, why not me? And Indy said, somebody has to fill this massive gap in women's freestyle, why not me? And you look at me and thought, it's just the right thing to do, why doesn't somebody do it? And every one of those kids in every one of those stories was a teenager. And they said, age is not an obstacle to me doing it. And so my question to you is, why let age be an obstacle to any of you to do what's really in your heart as well? When you drive home today, or you click refresh, or you go on to your next video, wonder, why not me? Why not me? Thank you.